Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So I'm very excited to speak here for the second time in a row. I want to thank Fortinet for inviting us to speak again. I want to say a few words about my background. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tufin. I started Tufin with my partner, Ruvi Kitov, about 18 years ago. We went public in April of 2019. We're public for about 3 years. And actually, quite recently, we became private again. We were acquired by a private equity firm called Turn River. Today, we have over 500 employees. We sold to over 2,000 customers worldwide. And our focus is enterprise access policies and security policy automation. I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end, but I'm not going to talk too much about us. I want to talk more about what's happening in the world and what is happening in many organizations from a network security perspective. So, before I get into the technology, I think it's been a year of really profound changes. Some years I feel that things just move so quickly. It's as if you live a lifetime of 10 years within the span of 1 year. This past weekend, we remember 9/11. I think most people in this room are old enough to remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when you heard about what happened in 9/11. Certainly that's true for me. And this last year sort of feels like that. It's not one great event like 9/11 that just kind of hits you like a ton of bricks, but it's a succession of events that have very wide ramifications. So I'm going to cover a little bit on the geopolitical stage, what's happening. I'm going to cover macroeconomics, which also went into great upheaval over the last 12 months. And obviously, I'm going to talk about technology as well. So I think the biggest geopolitical event of the year, and probably of the decade, is Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. It started with an unprovoked aggression by Russia, with terrible war crimes, massive suffering and death. Sadly, there's no end to the war in sight, but I'm happy, to see that over the past week, Ukraine has made very strong gains, and hopefully they're going to recover their lands. This war might come to an end in a few months. I'm really hopeful. But this war, it's affecting not just the Ukraine and Russia, it's affecting everybody worldwide. And I think it's interesting to note that a lot of people, most people got this thing wrong when they were assessing it. A lot of analysts and thinkers didn't expect Russia to invade Ukraine to begin with, overestimated the Russian military strength, underestimated the Ukrainians' resolve to fight, and also their military capabilities. So a lot of people got it wrong, and I think a lot of people were surprised by what happened next. And also we're seeing Western sanctions really having a crippling effect on the Russian economy. Companies like Tufin are removing all of their Russia business, right? We had to cut off all of our Russian customers. We don't do business in Russia anymore. We're fully compliant with the sanctions. What you might not realize, depending on what you do in network security, we literally needed to blacklist all of the IPs in Russia. They can't get on our website. They can't download the software. And so there's an electronic iron curtain that is being lifted, and it's not going to go down anytime soon between Russia and Eastern Ukraine and the rest of the world, or let's say at least the West. And a lot of people in this room deal with network security. So from a telecom perspective, which is a little bit closer to home, I think there's several aspects. One thing is that nobody really expected Starlink to roll out so quickly in terms of their satellite system. It took Elon Musk to get personally involved, roll out mobile satellite receivers to Ukraine very quickly. And Starlink's infrastructure was actually well designed from a security perspective. It turns out that Russia tried to hack it. They tried to jam the Starlink internet system, but they couldn't. And that was one of the key factors for much better communication within the Ukrainian armed forces. I think another aspect of communication is that Russia's systems were simply outdated, right? A lot of their systems in communication are from the 1980s. When they saw that those were hacked, they started literally grabbing cell phones off the street, which could be surveilled by the Ukrainian army. So from an OPSEC perspective, Ukraine had a significant advantage over Russia. And I think only in the last 3 months, what I'm hearing, Russia's trying to catch up. They're getting more advanced technology, although we do have sanctions. So the question is, where is it leaking and how are they getting these new communication systems? But they are getting better at it. From a cyber perspective, a lot of analysts expected massive attacks on infrastructure, both in Ukraine and in the West. So my dad, who's 86, he called me when the worst broke out and he said, Ruvi, you got to take out some cash. Go to the ATM and grab $3,000 because there's going to be attacks on the banks and the whole system is going to go down. And I didn't panic so much, but I know a lot of people did. Luckily, that did not happen. But Russia did obviously launch multiple attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure. They had limited success. I think the Ukrainians were very well prepared. They received help, I think, in real time from the US and from European allies. There's another aspect to Ukraine which many people don't really appreciate it. Ukraine has a lot of development capabilities. A lot of products that you see are actually being developed by people in Ukraine. So what they've done is they enlisted a lot of those developers and IT folks into their cybersecurity operations. So from that perspective, they had a lot of talent that was very motivated and ready to work immediately in the war efforts. I guess the question is, if we step back, what does this mean for cybersecurity moving forward for you guys, right? I think state-sponsored hacking is going to continue and even increase more over the next few years. And I think it's going to span not just governments, but enterprises of all types. And I think what's interesting is alliances change, right? Some countries and some companies that might have thought themselves, okay, I'm neutral, why should anybody attack me? Well, I don't think you can stay neutral on this topic, right? Everybody sort of had to pick sides in some way. For us, Tufin, we're working here in the West. We had to cut off all of our Russian customers and all of the Russian IP space. So you can't really stay neutral when there's such sanctions. So I think that investment in cybersecurity is going to need to increase even more so than before, both by governments and companies. Another point that I want to make when I'm thinking about what happened in the beginning of the war is the angle of the analysts. So in many respected analysts and thinkers, I think got the situation quite wrong. And I think this applies also to IT security. As you're thinking about your security strategy and architecture, it's always smart to consult with analysts. And I'm sure many of the people in this room speak with analysts on a pretty consistent basis. However, I think what we're clearly seeing from the Ukraine situation, analysts a lot of times indulge in groupthink. Very few analysts take a contrarian view. I think most of them prefer to take a safe approach and go with a mainstream, even if they might have some inkling, hey, I might be thinking something else, but you need to be really confident to take a contrarian view and go against the rest of the group. So in hindsight, a lot of them overestimated Russia, they underestimated the Ukrainian, and I think also the adversary, Russia here, acted in a really unpredictable and unexpected manner. By the way, that's what hackers do, right? They're going to be unpredictable. And so a lot of things that analysts might think, okay, this is where the threat's going to come from, it might come from somewhere completely different. And so my advice here is the following. While it's very good to speak with analysts, it should be part of your daily job. Do your own research as well and assume some of the advice you're getting is going to be simply wrong. Moving to the macroeconomy, I think macroeconomically there were dramatic changes as well over the last 12 months. It's been really unprecedented. We're witnessing tectonic shifts in the US and other Western countries. It's a unique combination of supply chain challenges, it's a reduction of economic stimulus packages and labor shortages really across the world. And this combination caused inflation to increase in the US. We saw the Federal Reserve raise interest rates, and we saw then a significant market sell-off in the US markets, followed by many other public markets. And the sell-off came at the end of the longest bull market in the US over the past century. So a really significant event when you're focused on finance. And I don't think anybody can really predict if this sell-off is over, right? Inflation is still high. The Federal Reserve is planning to raise interest rates again. You see the market go up and down all the time. Very unpredictable. But it goes much wider than just Wall Street, right? If we zoom into technology, I think we're going into a period of vendor consolidation. The valuations of public companies and private companies have come down really significantly. And there have been patient acquirers who are waiting on the sidelines, and now they're stepping in to strengthen their portfolios. So Tufin was recently acquired. In our case, I believe this acquisition is very good for Tufin and for its customers. For us, it's going to enable us to transition faster to a recurring revenue model. And for our customers, it's going to enable us to focus more on customer success moving forward. But our acquisition is not alone. We came on the heels of Mimecast and SailPoint, for those of you who remember. They got acquired as well. I expect a lot more mergers and acquisitions to take place over the coming months. And there's more effects of this bull market on Wall Street because we saw hyper investment in technology over the past few years. Security being one of the strongest sectors, there's literally thousands of cybersecurity startups. So you guys probably get phone calls, text messages, emails, you're inundated. Why? Because so much money, so much venture capital and private equity has gone into cybersecurity. Many people, many companies raise capital at very high valuations, some of them without having meaningful businesses, right? So now the cost of capital is higher. A lot of investors are sitting on the sidelines And smaller cybersecurities are facing significant difficulties raising new capital. Some of these companies are going to close. I think others will be acquired. And of the smaller companies, only strong companies with a viable product and an existing customer base are going to survive. Now, what does that mean to you guys? My advice is, well, first, you might get fewer phone calls, right? That'll be a good thing, all right? Fewer emails. But if you're considering buying products from a smaller company, and when I say smaller, I mean under 100 employees, let's say under $10 million of revenue, I would dig deeper into the financial background of those companies. Some of them might not be around in a couple of years when we have this period of consolidation, which I'm expecting to happen. Another impact is the supply chain issues, right? Equipment shipping, delivery, very unpredictable. We're feeling that at Tufin. We now need to order our appliances 9 months in advance in order to get them on time. So my advice in general, and it's probably obvious, but for those of you that are not thinking about it yet, try to get software that you can install either on virtual machines or in the cloud, unless your products are stocked on the shelf with your name on it. Like where that box is sitting. Otherwise, that's another impetus to move to the cloud. So shifting from the macroeconomy to technology, and we're going to talk more about the cloud now, and we're going to talk about the aspect of network security as it relates to on-premises, the cloud, and an enterprise network. Right? So one thing that's happening is organizations are moving more and more into the cloud. That's sort of obvious to everybody in this room. Enterprise networks are now extending more to the cloud. The cloud is no longer off on its own island. Right? It's an integral part of the corporate network. And the corporate network's edge has really shifted and blurred. And one trend that we're seeing that relates to cloud segmentation is firewall as a service in the cloud. Right? You have Azure and AWS that have now come out with their own firewalls in the cloud that provide another option for customers. I think at this point, the capabilities of these firewalls, they're not really like enterprise firewalls. They're not like a full Fortinet firewall. But I believe that they will be used in certain environments, especially by DevOps teams, probably not network security teams. But there's another option for DevOps and cloud teams to use. We're going to talk more about that in a couple minutes. Another trend we're seeing is much wider deployment of SD-WAN to replace or augment MPLS, especially following the shift to remote and hybrid work that we saw during the pandemic. With this move, we're seeing two things happening at once. On the one hand, SASE vendors are adding firewall capabilities into their product. And on the other side, firewall vendors like Fortinet are adding SASE capabilities to their products. So we're seeing a morphing of the two, where SASE is now a feature, if you will, or a capability within the firewall. Now, I think there was a move where organizations thought initially, hey, this cloud network is going to be managed by cloud and DevOps folks. And a lot of the people in this room or your teams were kept at arm's length. And then later on, they said, you know what, we're going to embed a security person in our team. So let's add somebody from your team into the cloud DevOps team, and that way we're going to get some of that DNA in. I think a lot of organizations are coming to appreciate that you really need security expertise to really do security properly, right? Embedding a security person in that team didn't really change the mindset. And I think this applies widely to a lot of organizations. So what we're seeing is that the pendulum is swinging back in many companies. The people in this room and the teams that you guys are managing, you're becoming more and more involved in cloud security. Well, previously you were at arm's length. I think that's a very good thing. And one of the things I'm going to talk about next is how can we actually bring that together, right? How can network security teams be more involved in cloud and have better collaboration with cloud and DevOps teams? So most organizations that we're seeing have adopted what we call a hub and spoke cloud security architecture. You have firewalls at this hub in the middle, inspecting north-south traffic between the on-premise and the cloud, also inspecting east-west traffic between different parts of the cloud network, right? So this is a typical architecture, and then most companies are using full enterprise firewalls at the hub to inspect the traffic going through it. So network security teams, right, people that you guys are managing, have the expertise of managing both the on-prem firewalls and the hub firewalls. Typically, cloud teams, DevOps teams manage access at the spokes. The spokes are here on the right side. They're the cloud accounts or VPCs. That's where the applications are being developed by different business units. The cloud hub, however, is becoming a shared responsibility area, right? So you have DevOps teams have admin privileges over the entire cloud, including the hub, whether it's a VPC or an account. And network security is actually managing connectivity and access control through the firewalls in the hub, right? So you have shared responsibility. And with this model, there's an inherent disconnect around ownership, right? Who owns the policy over the infrastructure? Network security manages the firewall policies at the hub. cloud and DevOps team own the infrastructure, right? So whenever cloud and DevOps teams want to connect, let's say the cloud teams want to connect back to the on-prem, they now need to go through the long approval cycle, the workflows. You guys know all about that. If you want to open a firewall rule, open a ticket, might take a few days if you're not automating. So they have a hard time opening access from the cloud to the on-prem and also troubleshooting connectivity. So there's a lot of friction there. And the questions that companies face with this model that has really come up now are who owns access control end-to-end and who defines and enforces the security policy. Another thing that we're seeing is that the cloud network is becoming more and more advanced with each year. Similar to the on-prem network in many ways in terms of complexity, right? You have in the cloud now gateway load balancers, transit gateways, VPC peering, internet gateways, and more. If you think about it conceptually, we've shifted from having Cisco gear on-premise to having virtualized AWS and Azure gear, right? Virtualized, but same constructs, because all of this has been developed already. But now you need to mimic that network because the cloud is becoming complex enough that you want to segment it, you need networking, you need routing between those items. So that is a major change. But cloud and DevOps teams are not savvy enough from a networking perspective to understand and troubleshoot the network topology, routing, and connectivity. So they need you guys, right? Network teams and security teams to help them with that. Another challenge stemming from cloud and DevOps teams managing cloud infrastructure is that they can actually manage security groups and these new AWS and Azure firewalls, right? So if they're making changes to these security groups or to these new AWS and Azure firewalls, network security managers don't have insight, control or visibility over these security groups. So your organizations could easily be exposed due to any oversight that's made by the cloud team. And there's yet another challenge. Because let's say that you want to manage these security groups, right? You want to have ownership, you get some process between you. Well, the DevOps and cloud teams are using CI/CD tools to put changes to security groups, right? They're using things like Terraform, CloudFormation templates, Ansible. They got their CI/CD tool chain, and network security teams usually don't have visibility into that tool chain. So the question is, what can you do about it, right? So we believe that organizations need a new approach with visibility across your entire enterprise network, from the on-premise to the cloud, all the way to the business units at the spoke, with a unified security policy across the entire enterprise network, and much better communication and collaboration between network security teams and cloud teams, including enabling network security teams to have monitoring and control over those security groups and over these new AWS and Azure firewalls. All right, before I wrap up and open it to questions, I just want to say a few words about Tufin, who we are, and briefly introduce ourselves. We are the security policy company. We deal with access policies. And when I say access policies, I mean what can talk to what, or who can talk to whom, across the entire enterprise network, from the on-prem to the private cloud to the public cloud. We have over 2,000 customers and over half of the Fortune 50. And our company vision is to help the world's largest organizations significantly improve their security and agility. And that drives our actions and decision-making at Tufin every day. We use policy-based automation to help customers implement security changes in minutes instead of days, with dramatically better security and accuracy. All right, and with that, I want to open it up to questions from the audience.
Hi there. Thank you so much for the presentation. Hamza Fadawala from Morgan Stanley. You had a really interesting few slides about this sort of the shared responsibility between networking and cloud and DevOps teams. How do you see that playing out? Do you think that the cloud and DevOps teams will just inevitably have to take more responsibility as it relates to security over time? Or do you think it's going to be on the networking side where a lot of that security policy is continuing to be enforced?
It's a great question. Thank you. So I think that the cloud and DevOps teams are not going to give up the admin privileges that they have in the cloud. So it will need to be, I think it will continue to be a shared responsibility, but somebody will need to define what is the policy, and that's usually network security folks. And I think at the end, I'm envisioning that it's going to be similar to what's happening in the on-prem. In many ways, the cloud is mimicking the on-prem. We're seeing that with the network components. So think about it this way. You have a network team, sets up the Cisco gear, and you have even people setting up the firewalls, and yet there's a different team that defines what are going to be the rules, what's the policy, what are we going to allow or what we're going to not allow. I think that separation is going to be where the cloud and DevOps teams are they're going to own the pipes, but they should not own what will be the configuration or the policy of those pipes. I think that's down to network security folks. People in this room and your teams need to define what will be the security policy.
Ruvi, hi. Congrats on the acquisition. Shaul Leal with Cowen. Quick macro firewall related question for you. I recall a conversation we had in the past. Do you think that as cloud is becoming more ubiquitous, more prevalent, is that good news for the network security firewalls and providers? Can we see a linearity, or does it have to be inverse relations between both?
All right, thank you, Shaul. So, and I'll just preface for those that don't know. So, Shaul Eyal is an analyst covering Wall Street and specifically network security and other companies. And I think, Shaul, the context of your question is, are firewall companies like Fortinet and others going to continue to succeed commercially in the face of the cloud? I think the answer is yes, because I think the way I see it, firewall companies like Fortinet are the biggest security companies in the market. They have the most intellectual property on security. At the end of the day, they have the most technologists. I think that they're going to own security in many ways. I think even during the downturn, I see Fortinet and other firewall companies acquiring a lot of smaller companies, beefing up their portfolio. And I think as you shift to the cloud, the fact that it's a box or it's virtual is meaningless. And I think that's one of the things, like one of our points at Tufin is that it's all about the logic. It's not about the hardware. I mean, yes, you need hardware that's fast enough, but it is the decision making, like what will those rules say? And if suddenly you're in the cloud and it's virtualized, think about it this way. If previously you thought, hey, I need 1,000 firewalls, but when it's virtual and as a service, I can roll out 10,000, right? It's so easy. I think it becomes so much easier for customers to roll it out. It's software defined. So in many ways, I see a lot of growth there. How will they manage commercially? I'm not sure, but I don't think the firewall vendors are going to disappear. I know there's a lot of new startups that claim that firewall vendors are dead and they're going to figure it all out. Look, at the end of the day, it's going to be similar in many ways to the on-prem network. You need segmentation. You need really good technology there. And I think all of the intellectual property here, a lot of it, sits with the firewall vendors. All right. Thank you very much.